The notification came on a Tuesday evening when Kim Yuna was making instant noodles in her small apartment in Chicago. She was 26 years old and lived alone in a place that was barely big enough for one person. The walls were thin and she could hear her neighbors watching television. Her life was simple now. She taught self-defense classes at a community center 3 times a week. She helped old ladies learn how to escape from attackers. She showed young girls how to throw a proper punch. 3 years ago, she had been different. 3 years ago, she had been a rising star in mixed martial arts fighting. Her coaches said she had something special. They said she moved like water and hit like stone. But then her knee gave out during a championship match. She heard the pop and felt the fire, and just like that, her fighting career was over now. She stirred her noodles and tried not to think about what could have been. The hologram appeared without warning. It flickered into existence above her kitchen counter and cast blue light across the cheap tiles. Yuna dropped her chopsticks and stepped back. Her heart was pounding, but her hands were steady. They were always steady. The message was written in a language she had never seen. But somehow she understood every word. You have been chosen as Earth representative for the Galactic Combat Trial. You must report to the transit point in Seoul within 48 hours. Failure to appear will result in automatic forfeit for your species. Yuna read it 3 times. She thought maybe she was dreaming. She pinched her arm hard enough to leave a mark. She was not dreaming. The hologram showed more information. The Galactic Federation was real. Aliens were real. Humanity had made contact 3 years ago, but the governments of the world had kept it secret. The combat trials were a competition between species, a way to settle disputes without full-scale war. Each species sent one champion. The winner earned power and resources for their homeworld. Earth had lost 17 times in a row. 17 humans had entered the arena. 17 humans had been defeated. Some had died. Others had come back broken in body and spirit. The galaxy thought humans were weak. They thought Earth was a joke, and now the algorithm had chosen her. Yuna sat down on her kitchen floor. She stayed there for a long time. The next morning, everything changed. Men in black suits came to her door. They were government agents, and they were not happy. They took her to a facility underground where generals and scientists asked her questions for hours. General Park Dong-yuk was the angriest of them all. He was a tall man with gray hair and cold eyes. He had sent soldiers to the trials before. He had watched them lose. "This is insane," he said to the room full of officials. "She's a retired fighter with a bad knee. We should send special forces. We should send our best." But the rules were clear. The Federation algorithm chose the champion. No one understood how it worked. No one could override it. If Earth tried to send someone else, they would be disqualified. Yuna sat quietly while they argued about her like she was not there. She watched their faces. She saw their fear. They were afraid of losing again. They were afraid of what the galaxy thought of humanity. She was afraid too. But she did not show it. That night her brother came to see her. Lee Jae-won was 2 years younger than her. He was a quantum physicist who worked at NASA. He was the smartest person she knew and also the kindest. He had brought her favorite food, and he sat with her in the small room they had given Harry. Looked at the selection data. He said his eyes were serious. "I hacked into the Federation database. Do not tell anyone." Yuna almost smiled. "What did you find?" "The algorithm did not pick you randomly. It scanned your biometrics during the earthquake relief mission last year." "Do you remember?" She remembered a building had collapsed in Turkey. She had been there with a volunteer group. A child was trapped under concrete. There was no time to wait for equipment. She had lifted rubble that should have been too heavy. She had crawled through spaces that should have been too small. She had saved the child. The algorithm saw your stress response. Jae-won said, "When that building was falling apart, your heart rate dropped. Everyone else panicked, but you got calmer. The algorithm flagged you as anomalous." "What does that mean?" "I do not know, but it means something. The Federation has been watching us for years. They have data on millions of humans. They could have picked anyone. They picked Yuna. Thought about the child she had saved. She thought about the feeling she had in that moment. The world had gone quiet. Everything had become simple. There was danger, and there was action. There was no room for fear. Maybe they made a mistake, she said, maybe. Jaewon took her hand, but maybe they saw something true. The transit point was in Seoul. It was hidden inside what looked like an ordinary office building, but underground. There was technology that hurt to look at. Thousands of people had gathered outside. The news had leaked somehow, and now the whole world knew that Earth was sending another champion to the trial. Yuna walked through the crowd with soldiers on either side. People were shouting, some were cheering, some were crying, some held signs that said things like, "Bring her home" and "Earth Strong." She did not look at them. She kept her eyes forward. Her mother and father were waiting at the entrance. They were old now, and they looked so small. Her mother was crying. Her father was trying not to. Her mother hugged her tight and whispered something in Korean. "Be brave, my daughter. Come back to us." Her father just nodded. He had never been good with words, but his eyes said everything. The teleportation platform was a circle of light in the center of a vast chamber. Ambassador Crix was waiting there. Crix was the Federation liaison assigned to Earth. He was tall and thin, with a body like an insect, and eyes that reflected light in strange ways. He did not have a mouth that Yuna could see, but somehow he spoke before. "We proceed," Crix said, and his voice echoed through the chamber. "I must inform the observers of the competition parameters." The room went quiet. Cameras were broadcasting to every nation on Earth. Earth's representative will enter the arena unarmed. Crix announced, per Federation regulations, primitive species are not permitted advanced weaponry until they achieve Tier 3 civilization status. Humans are currently rated at Tier 0.7. The room exploded. People were screaming in anger. Officials were shouting demands. Unarmed. How could she fight unarmed? Other species had plasma weapons and gravity hammers, and things humans could not even imagine. Yuna stood still in the chaos. She looked at Ambassador Crix. She thought she saw something in those strange eyes, something that might have been curiosity or respect. She stepped onto the platform. The light grew brighter. Her body began to tingle. She could hear her mother crying out her name. She could hear the generals still arguing. She could hear her own heartbeat, slow and steady. She thought about what her brother had said. The algorithm saw something. She hoped he was right. The light consumed her, and she was gone. The last thing she heard before the teleportation took her was the crowd going silent on the other side of the galaxy. An ancient system stirred to life. It had been watching Earth for a very long time. It had been waiting for someone exactly like her. The combat trial was about to begin. Yuna opened her eyes and found herself in a room made of light. The walls were white and smooth, and they hummed with energy she could feel in her bones. The air smelled clean and sharp, like nothing she had ever breathed before. She was alone, but she did not feel alone. She felt like something was watching her. A holographic screen appeared in front of her face. Words scrolled across it in that strange language that somehow made sense in her mind. Combatant, registered human female designation. Unahum world, Earth Sol System civilization, Tier 0.7, pre-spacefaring weapons. Authorization denied. She had expected that part. They had told her she would be unarmed. They had told her she would face warriors with weapons that could cut through steel like paper. She had accepted this. She had no choice, but then something unexpected happened. The screen flickered, new words appeared, scanning. Biological parameters anomaly detected. Reassessing threat classification. I watched as streams of data cascaded down the display. The system was analyzing her. It was looking at her bones and muscles and nerves. It was measuring things she did not have words for. She could feel it, somehow like fingers pressing gently against her mind. The scan went on for what felt like hours. It was probably only seconds. Analysis complete. Note: Earth does not need weapons. Before she could understand what that meant, the walls dissolved. She was standing in a coliseum. The arena was vast and ancient and impossible. It stretched out in every direction under an artificial sky that looked almost real. Sand covered the ground, red sand like dried blood. The air was hot and dry, and it tasted like metal around her rows of viewing platforms that reached up toward the fake sky. They were filled with beings from across the galaxy, millions of eyes watching. Some of the watchers were beautiful in strange ways. Some were terrifying. Some were so alien that her brain could not make sense of their shapes. Floating drones circled overhead. They were broadcasting this moment to 10,000 worlds. Billions of creatures were watching her right now. They were watching the primitive human who had come to their arena without weapons. A horn sounded. The noise shook the ground. Her first opponent materialized on the other side of the arena. He was a Vorthan warrior 7 feet tall and covered in scales that gleamed like wet stone. His muscles moved under his skin like cables. His eyes were yellow with black slits. For pupils, in his hands he carried a plasma lance. It crackled with energy that made the air shimmer. The Vorthans were famous across the galaxy. They came from a high-gravity world where only the strongest survived. They had been bred for combat. For 10,000 years, they had won the combat trials more times than any other species, except the ancient ones. This Vorthan looked at Una and made a sound that might have been laughter human. He growled to translate her implant they had given her. Turned his words into something she could understand. I will make your death quick. Your species' shame is already complete. Una did not answer. She was listening to something else. Something inside her. The system was still there. She could feel it in the back of her mind. It was showing her information about the Vorthan. His weak points, his movement patterns, the way his weight shifted before he attacked. She did not know how she could see these things, but she could. The horn sounded again. Vorthan charged. He was fast, faster than anything that big should be able to move. The plasma lance swept toward her in an arc that would cut her in half at the waist. The air screamed as the weapon passed through it. Una did not think her body moved on its own. She dropped low under the swing, so close that she felt the heat of the plasma on her hair. She rolled across the sand and came up inside his guard. Before he could pull the lance back, she was already striking. Her palm hit his throat. She aimed for a spot the system had shown her, a cluster of nerves that controlled his breathing and balance, a spot that would not kill him but would shut down his body like flipping a switch. The Vorthan made a choking sound. His yellow eyes went wide. His legs folded under him. He hit the sand hard and did not move. Silence fell across the Colosseum. Mia stood over her fallen opponent. She was breathing hard, but her hands were steady. They were always steady. The Vorthan was alive. She could see his chest moving, but he would not be getting up for a long time. Then the system spoke. Its voice came from everywhere at once. It echoed off the walls and filled the artificial sky. Match duration 3.7 seconds. Victory Earth. The silence continued for another heartbeat. Then the noise began. Some of the watchers were cheering. Some were screaming in anger. Some were making sounds she could not identify. But all of them were looking at her. All of them were seeing her for the first time on Earth. People were crying in the streets. It was the middle of the night in Chicago, but no one was sleeping. They had watched on their phones and televisions. They had seen their champion enter the arena with nothing but her hands. They had seen her win. In less than 4 seconds, General Park was standing in a command center with his mouth hanging open. He had been ready to watch another human die. He had been ready to add another name to the list of Earth failures. He did not know what he had just witnessed. In Seoul, Una mother fell to her knees and thanked every god she could name. Her father stood very still and smiled for the first time in years. In the NASA facility, her brother J1 was staring at his screens. The data from the broadcast was impossible. The speed of her movement, the precision of her strike. No human should be able to do what she had just done. The algorithm knew he whispered to himself. It knew what she was back in the arena. Una was escorted to a preparation chamber. Medical drones scanned her for injuries. There were none. She had not taken a single hit. A new message appeared on the holographic screen. First round complete. Proceeding to second. Round opponent Shaper of Nexus 7. She did not know what a Shaper was. She did not know what waited for her in the next fight. But she knew something now, something important. The system had called her an anomaly. It had said Earth did not need weapons. She was beginning to understand what that meant. Humans had evolved on a world that wanted to kill them. Every day of human history had been a fight for survival. They had faced predators and plagues and disasters. They had killed each other in wars that lasted generations. They had learned to fight before they learned to speak. Other species had developed technology to overcome their weaknesses. Humans had become their own weapons. The system knew this. It had seen it in her DNA. It had seen it in the way she moved and the way she thought. It had been waiting for. Someone like Una sat down on the floor of her chamber. She closed her eyes. She thought about her family back home. She thought about the billions of humans who were counting on her. She thought about the 17 champions who had come before her and failed. She would not fail. She could feel the system watching her still. It was curious about her. She was curious about it too. There were secrets here. Secrets about humanity and about the galaxy and about wars that had been fought before Earth even existed. She would learn those secrets, but first she had more fights to win. The horn sounded in the distance. The second round was beginning. After his second victory, the other competitors began to avoid Una. Walked through the station corridors and watched them step aside. Beings that towered over her. Beings with claws and fangs and weapons built into their bodies. They all moved out of her way. They would not meet her eyes. Her second opponent had been a Shaper of Nexus 7. The Shapers were crystalline beings made of living silicon. They could reform their bodies into any shape. They could become blades and shields and things with 1,000 cutting edges. They had never lost a combat trial in 200 years. The system had shown Una their weakness. Every crystal had a resonance frequency, a vibration that would shatter it if struck at exactly the right angle. She had found the Shaper core and hit it once. The creature had fallen apart into 1,000 harmless pieces. It would reform in a few hours. None of them had been permanently damaged. She did not want to kill. She just wanted to win. She sat in the competitor quarters and tried to understand what was happening to her. The system was giving her knowledge she should not have. It was showing her how to defeat creatures she had never seen before. It was changing her somehow. She could feel. A voice interrupted her thoughts. "May I speak with you?" Una looked up. A being stood in the doorway of her quarters. She was tall and slender with skin that shimmered like pearls in moonlight. Her eyes were large and silver, and they held an expression that felt familiar, curiosity mixed with something like fear. "I am called Grace," the being said. She had chosen a human name out of respect for Una species. "I am Melodian. We are empaths and historians. We study the evolution of species across the galaxy." "I have been watching you." Una gestured for Grace to enter. "Why? Because what you are doing should be impossible," Grace said. She sat down across from Una, and her opalescent skin flickered with colors that might have been emotions. "I have seen your files. I know your civilization rating. Humans are barely spacefaring. You have no genetic modifications, no combat implants, no enhanced biology. And yet, you are defeating warriors who have trained for centuries. Maybe humans are just good at fighting." Una said. Grace made a sound that might have been a laugh. "No," she said. "You do not understand. The Federation has ranked thousands of species. We measure civilizations by their technology. But there is another metric we do not publicize: biological threat assessment." "What does that mean?" Grace waved her hand and holographic projections filled the room. Data streams and charts and images of worlds Una had never seen. Most species evolved on stable worlds. Grace explained their planets had gentle climates and predictable seasons. They developed intelligence, and then technology, and then warfare. Their bodies stayed baseline. They needed tools to fight. She pulled up a file marked with red symbols. Red was a color Una had not seen in any other. Species records your world is different, Grace said. Her voice was quiet now, almost afraid. Your planet has extreme conditions. Massive axial tilt that creates violent seasons, constant tectonic activity, predators in every environment, diseases that mutate faster than medicine can adapt. Your world is what we call a Category 5, Death World. Una thought about Earth. She thought about hurricanes and earthquakes. She thought about lions and sharks and the countless ways nature tried to kill humans. Every day, she had never thought of it as unusual. It was just home. Humans did not just survive, Grace continued. You became the apex predator of a death world. You hunted everything. You drove other species to extinction. You even hunted each other. Do you know what that means in galactic terms? Una shook her head. Grace showed her the comparisons, side-by-side data on different species. Reaction times and endurance levels and pain tolerance. The human numbers were marked in red every time. Your reflexes are 3 times faster than the galactic average, Grace said. Your species can run prey to death over long distances. No other known species can do this. Your bodies can heal from wounds that would kill most beings. Your brains can recognize patterns and predict threats faster than combat computers. She paused and looked at Una with those silver eyes. Vorthan you defeated was considered elite. His species evolved on a paradise world. They developed weapons because they needed them to survive. You. She stopped. Your species weaponized itself. Una sat in silence for a long moment. She thought about human history, the wars that had killed millions, the violence that never seemed to end, the capacity for cruelty that lived in every human heart. She had always thought of these things as failures, as proof that humanity was broken. But there was another side. The soldiers who threw themselves on grenades to save their friends, the mothers who lifted cars to rescue their children, the endless stubborn refusal to give up even when everything was lost. What are you telling me? She finally asked. The system saw it, Grace said. When it scanned you on arrival, it recognized what you are. The system is old, very old. It has watched species rise and fall for 1,000,000 years, and it recognized your biology, recognized it from what. Grace hesitated. This is not public knowledge. If the Federation knew. I told you, there would be consequences. Tell me anyway. 1,000,000 years ago, there was a species that ruled this galaxy, Grace said. They built the stations and the system and everything we now call the Federation. They were powerful beyond anything that exists today. And they looked very much like Una felt something cold move through her chest. What happened to them? War, Grace said. An enemy came from outside the known universe. Something that consumed everything in its path. The first ones fought with every weapon they could create. Nothing worked. So they changed themselves. They made their bodies into weapons. They became living instruments of destruction. Did they win? Yes, Grace said. But it cost them everything. Their civilization collapsed. Their population dwindled. They faded away over thousands of years. But before they disappeared, they did something. What they seeded the galaxy with life. They created the conditions for new species to evolve. They hoped that somewhere, somehow, a species would develop naturally that was like them. A species that would not need weapons because they were weapons. And you think humans? Grace nodded. The system thinks so. It has been watching Earth for a very long time. It has been waiting for a species that matched the template. And now it has found one. Una stood up. She walked to the window that looked out at the dying red star. The light was beautiful and sad, like a sunset that would last forever. Why did it choose me? She asked. There are billions of humans. Why me? Because you are what they hope for, Grace said. Not just strong, not just fast. You are what humans can become when they stop fighting each other and start fighting together. The system saw it in your data. You get calmer under pressure. You get sharper when others would break. You are the best version of what your species. Kimbei horns sounded in the distance. Another match was beginning, somewhere in the arena. Another species was fighting for their future arena. Turned back to Grace. Thank you for telling me. What will you do now? Grace asked. Yuna thought about the matches still to come. She thought about the enemies waiting for her. She thought about the ancient system watching her every move. I will win, she said. And then, I will find out what the system really wants. She walked out of her quarters and headed toward the arena. The other competitors still moved out of her way. But now when she looked at them, she saw something new in their eyes, not just fear-hope. The combat trial was designed to break spirits as much as bodies. 16 species had entered the competition. One would emerge as champion. The winner would earn their homeworld resources and political power for 10 years. The losers would return. Home in shame or not return. At Yuna had won her first 2 matches in seconds. The galaxy had noticed now. The real tests began. Her third opponent was a Kathrani warrior. The Kathrani had 4 arms and stood 8 feet tall. Their bodies were covered in natural armor plates that could stop plasma bolts. Their homeworld had been at war for so long that they had evolved for combat, the way other species evolved for breathing. The Kathrani warrior entered the arena carrying 2 curved blades and a shield made of compressed gravity. She moved with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large. Her 4 eyes tracked Yuna with predator focus. Little human, the Kathrani said, I have killed 37 opponents in these trials. I have never lost. I will add you to my count. Yuna did not answer. She was listening to the system. The sift of information flowed into her mind like water into an empty cup. The Kathrani fought with their arms, but their balance came from their center. Their armor was thick, but their joints were exposed. And most importantly, they expected their opponents to retreat. Humans did not retreat. The horn sounded. The Kathrani charged, all 4 arms moving in different patterns. Her blades carved the air in arcs that should have been impossible to track. Her shield covered her vital points perfectly. She was a storm of violence and death. Yuna moved forward. The Kathrani faltered for just a moment. Every opponent she had ever faced had stepped back, had tried to create distance, had looked for escape. No one moved toward a Kathrani charge. No one was that crazy. Yuna was inside her guard. Before she could adjust, she used the warrior-own momentum against her. Aikido principles she had learned in a small dojo in Chicago applied to an alien body on a station orbiting a dying star. She redirected one arm into another. She stepped on a joint that bent the wrong way. She flowed around the blades like water around stones. The Kathrani was fast, but Yuna was faster. The Kathrani was strong, but strength meant nothing if you could not land a hit. The fight lasted 40 seconds. It ended with the warrior on the ground, unable to rise with 3 of her 4 arms locked in positions that would break if she moved. The system announced her victory. The crowd made sounds she could not identify on Earth. People were gathering in the streets now, millions of them watching on giant screens in cities around the world. They were learning something about themselves, something they had forgotten in the age of technology and comfort. Humans were survivors. Humans were fighters. Humans had crawled out of the mud and conquered a world that tried to kill them every day. And now a single human woman was showing the galaxy what that meant. The 4th round was against the Dren. To Dren were nightmares given form. They came from a swamp world thick with toxic gases. Their bodies could produce dozens of different poisons. Their skin secreted acid. Their bite could dissolve metal. They had won 3 of the last 10 trials by simply outlasting their opponents, waiting for the poison to work. Dren that faced Yuna was patient. It circled her, slowly dripping venom on the sand. It did not speak. The Dren did not believe in words. Yuna watched it move. She saw the way its throat expanded before it spit. She saw the slight tension in its legs before it lunged. She saw the pattern in its circling, the way it was trying to back her into a corner where it's poison. Clouds would be most effective. She did not let it. She closed the distance before its chemical glands could fully activate. She moved so fast that the Dren could not track her. She was behind it before it knew she had moved. Her arm wrapped around its primary nerve cluster A, submission hold modified for a body that had never been submitted before. Dren struggled. Its poison burned her skin, but humans had evolved resistance to countless toxins. Their bodies could survive things that would kill other species in seconds. She held on through the pain. She held on until the Dren went limp. The system announced her victory. Her arms were burned and bleeding, but she was still standing. Medical drones rushed to treat her wounds. They healed. Fast human bodies healed faster than the drones expected. The doctors who examined her made notes in their files. Notes that would be studied for centuries. The semifinal was different. Her opponent was Marcus, champion of the Morthax Imperium. The Morthax were cyborgs. They had merged their organic bodies with combat machines over thousands of years. Marcus was the culmination of that evolution. More metal than flesh, more weapon than warrior. He had won 47 consecutive matches. He had killed 11 opponents outright. He stood 12 feet tall. His arms ended in plasma cannons. His chest contained a reactor that could power a small city. His brain was linked to targeting systems that could track 100 threats at once. He was not just a fighter. He was a war machine given consciousness, and the Morthax Imperium had controlled the trials for 12 years. They would not accept losing to a primitive human. Ambassador Crix visited Una the night before the match. "You have upset a delicate balance," he said. His insect eyes were impossible to read, but his voice carried warning. The Morthax control significant portions of Federation trade. They have already filed protests against your participation. They say humans are too primitive to compete. They want you disqualified. On what grounds? Una asked. Any grounds they can find, Crix replied. The Federation Council is divided. Some admire what you have done. Others fear what it means. If you lose tomorrow, this all goes away. If you win, if I win, then everything changes. Crix made a sound that might have been a sigh. I have served the Federation for 300 years. I have seen species rise and fall. I have never seen anything like you. Be careful, human. There are forces at work here. Beyond a simple combat trial. Una nodded. I know. Crix paused at the door. May I ask you something? Yes. Why did you come here? You could have refused. You could have let someone else take your place. Why did you enter an arena where you knew you might die? Una thought about the question. She thought about her parents and her brother. She thought about the students at her community center. She thought about all the humans who had looked up at the stars and wondered if they were alone, because someone had. She said, because Earth needed someone to stand. Crix was silent for a long moment. Then he made that sound again, the one that might have been laughter. I am beginning to understand, he said, why the system chose your species. The semifinal match drew the largest audience in trial history. Every inhabited world in the galaxy was watching. Billions of beings waited to see if the human miracle would continue or end. Marcus entered the arena like a god of war. His metal body gleamed under the artificial sun. His weapons hummed with barely contained power. The ground shook with each step he took. Looked at Una, and his mechanical voice boomed across the Colosseum. I have studied your previous matches. I have analyzed every movement you made. My systems I've calculated 1,437 possible attack patterns you might use. I have prepared counters for all of them. You cannot surprise me. You cannot outthink me. You cannot defeat me. Una stretched her arms. She rolled her neck. She took a deep breath. The horn sounded. Marcus was fast for something so large. His targeting systems tracked her the moment she moved. His plasma cannons fired in patterns designed to cut off every possible escape route. His metal fists swung in arcs calculated to intercept any attack, but there was a flaw. His organic brain and his Cybernetic systems had a delay between them. Half a second where his thoughts had to translate into machine action. Half a second where his body was not quite. Synchronized Una lived in that half second. She moved in the gaps between his calculations. She struck where metal met flesh. She was not where his targeting predicted. She was somewhere else, always somewhere else. Marcus grew frustrated. His attacks became faster, more aggressive, more desperate. He could not understand how she was avoiding him. His systems could not explain what was happening. 90 seconds after the match began, Una found the access port in his back, the one the Morthax engineers used for maintenance, the one his designers never thought an opponent would reach. She did not destroy him. She did not kill him. She simply shut him down. Marcus collapsed. The most advanced warrior machine in the galaxy fell to the sand, defeated by a human with no weapons at all. The system made its announcement. Finalists determined Earth, and across the galaxy, something shifted. Something that had been waiting for a million years began to wake up. The final match was scheduled for 3 days. After the semifinal, Una would face the Archon A, being so old that it had watched stars be born and die. A being from a species that had existed before the Federation, before the trials, before most life in the galaxy had learned to walk. The Archons were legends. They had seeded worlds with life. They had guided young species through their first steps into space. They were considered gods by civilizations that have forgotten their true origins. Only a handful of Archons remain now, scattered across the galaxy, like fading embers of a fire that once lit the universe. No one had ever defeated an Archon in combat. No one had ever tried. But on the night before the final match, something unprecedented happened. Una was alone in her quarters when the walls began to glow. The light was soft at first, then brighter, until she could see nothing else. She felt her body dissolve into particles of energy. She felt herself being transported somewhere new. When her vision cleared, she was standing in a chamber the size of a small city. Massive data streams floated through the air like rivers of light. Processing cores the size of buildings hummed with power so vast she could feel it vibrating in her teeth. This was the heart of the station, the place where the system lived. A figure materialized in front of her. It looked almost human. 2 arms, 2 legs, a face with features that seemed familiar. The system had chosen this form deliberately. It wanted her to understand something. We have not spoken directly to a competitor in 300,000 years, the system said. Its voice was neither male nor female, young nor old. It was simply there, filling the space around her like air. But you require context. Before the final match, Una stood straight, despite her fear. Who are you? She asked. What are you? We are what remains of the first civilization. The system walked toward her, and she saw that its body was made of like held together by will. We built this station. We created the trials. We seeded the galaxy with the potential for life. And we have been waiting a very long time for someone like you. System waved its hand, and the chamber changed. Around them images appeared, memories from 1,000,000 years ago. A civilization of beings that looked almost human. Cities that floated among the stars. Ships that crossed galaxies in heartbeats, technology so advanced it seemed like magic. We were proud, the system said, perhaps too proud. We thought we had conquered every challenge the universe could offer. We were wrong. The images darkened. Something was coming from outside the known universe. A force of pure destruction that consumed everything in its path. Stars were devoured, planets were shattered. Entire species were erased from existence in moments. We called them the Void. The system continued. We fought them with every weapon we could devise. Every technology we had developed over millions of years. Every strategy our greatest minds could conceive. Nothing worked. They could not be stopped. They could not be reasoned with. They simply consumed. So, what did you do? Una asked. We became what we needed to be. The system replied. We could not defeat them with weapons, so we turned ourselves Into weapons we modify our bodies, our minds, our very essence. We became living instruments of destruction. The images showed the transformation. Beautiful beings becoming something terrifying, something powerful beyond measure. They fought the void. With their bare hands, they tore through the darkness with bodies that had become harder than any metal, faster than any ship, stronger than any force. The universe had known we won, the system said. But the cost was everything. Our civilization collapsed. Our population dwindled. Those who survived could no longer reproduce. Our modifications had made us too different from what we had been. We faded away over thousands of years. The images showed empty cities, beautiful architecture crumbling to dust. Ships drifting silent through space. A species that had saved the galaxy dying alone before. We disappeared completely. We did one final thing. We seeded the galaxy with our genetic template. We created the conditions for life to evolve on thousands of worlds. We hoped that somewhere, somehow, a species would develop naturally that was like us naturally. Una repeated, yes. When we modified ourselves, we broke something essential. We needed a species that would become what we were without. The modifications, a species that would evolve the ability to fight the void without losing the ability to live. The system looked at her with eyes that held 1,000,000 years of patience. Your world was almost identical to ours. A planet that tried to kill its inhabitants every day, a crucible that forged survivors into warriors, into predators, into something more. We watched Earth for a very long time. We watched humans climb out of the mud and conquer their world. We watched you fight each other and somehow survive. We watched you develop technology but never lose your edge. And the trials Una asked a test, the system said. A way to find the species that matched our template. You are the first to pass, the first in 1,000,000 years. What happens now? The void is returning. We can feel them at the edges of reality, stirring in the dark between galaxies. The Federation is not prepared. Their weapons will be useless against what is coming, but humanity might be ready. What do you want from me? Choice. The system stepped closer to her. The Archon you will face tomorrow is the last of us. The last being who remembers what we were and what we fought. The Archon will test you one final time. Not to defeat you, but to judge you. Judge me for what? To see if humanity is ready. To see if you can be what we could not. To see if there is hope. Una thought about everything she had learned. She thought about the violence in human history. The endless wars, the cruelty, the capacity for destruction. That seemed to be built into human DNA, but she also thought about the love, the way humans sacrificed for each other, the way they built and created and dreamed, the way they refused to surrender even. When everything was lost, I did not ask for this. She said, neither did we. The system replied, but you have already answered, have you not? You entered this arena knowing you might die. You fought not for glory, but because your people needed someone to stand. That is what makes your species remarkable. Not your strength, not your speed, not your ability to kill, your will. The light began to fade. The system was sending her back. The final match is not what you think, the system said. Its voice was growing distant. The Archon has been waiting for someone like you for so long. Do not be afraid of what comes next. Be ready for it. Una opened her eyes in the arena. The Colosseum was fuller than she had ever seen it. Beings from every corner of the galaxy had come to witness this moment. The broadcast was reaching worlds that had never watched the trials before. This was history. Everyone knew it. The Archon materialized across the sand. It was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Light and shadow, and something older than stars given form. It towered over her, radiant with power accumulated across eons. When it spoke, its voice went directly into her mind. Child of the inheritors, I have waited so long. Una stood her ground. I am not a weapon. The Archon agreed. You are something better. You are hope. The Archon did not attack. Instead, it knelt. The trial is complete. The Archon voice rang across the Colosseum so every being could hear. What was seeded in humanity has blossomed. They carry the legacy of those who sacrificed everything. They are the inheritors. The system made its announcement combat trial complete Victor Earth. The inheritors have returned. The galaxy is no longer alone on Earth. Billions of people watched in confusion and wonder. They did not understand everything that had happened, but they understood. Enough. They understood that something had changed. Something fundamental in the arena walked toward the Archon. "What happens now?" she asked you. "Go home," the Archon replied. "You tell your people what they are. You prepare them for what is coming. The void will not wait forever, and when they arrive, you must be ready. Will you help us? We will do what we can," the Archon said. "But we are fading. The last light of a fire that burned out long ago. The future belongs to you now." Una looked up at the artificial sky. She thought about her family waiting for her. She thought about the billions of humans who had no idea what was coming. She thought about the weight of an ancient trust being placed on her shoulders. "How do I prepare them?" she asked you. "Already know," the Archon said. "You have always known humanity did not survive a death world by being gentle. You survived by being strong, by being stubborn, by refusing to give up. Now you must do it again, but this time not for one world, for all of." Then Muna returned to Earth a few days later. The teleportation platform in Seoul was surrounded by millions of people. They had come from every country on Earth to see her. They were cheering and crying and holding signs that said things she could not read through her tears. Her mother and father pushed through the crowd. Her mother was sobbing. Her father was trying very hard not to. Her brother Jaewon stood behind them with the biggest smile she had ever seen. "Welcome home," her mother whispered. Welcome home, but Yuna knew she would not be home for long. There was work to do. Humanity had to be prepared for what was coming. They had to learn what they truly were. They had to become what the first ones had hoped for. Galaxy was watching, and for the first time in a million years, there was hope high. Above the Earth, the system watched through satellites it had placed centuries ago. It had found what it was looking for. It had found the inheritors. Now it could finally rest. The message spread across the stars, carried by a million broadcasts. Earth does not need weapons, and humanity was finally ready to prove it.